All right, welcome to today's live stream. Let me just make sure that everything's looking good. I'm going to take a little break. Somebody recommended, and I think it was a good recommendation, to take a little break from sculpting Charlie Kirk, which is what I've been working on for a while. And so that sculpture is wrapped up in the background. And I'm going to move on to another sculpture that I did in the same clay, the same color clay, which is of Jesus Christ. The risen Christ is this one. And so I thought I'd work on that a little bit. Okay. So this one I started, did I start it this year or maybe last year? During a session of General Conference for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. General Conference is our, what would you say? It's like our Super Bowl or something. Like our, where all the leaders of the church come and speak to us, the apostles and prophet will speak to us and give instruction, and so that's when I started this one. It was during that a session of General Conference, and conference is actually coming up. I think it's not this weekend, but next weekend, and it's just there's Saturday. There's a couple. I think there's 3 sessions on Saturday, and then 2 sessions on Sunday where they just have speakers come and talk about Christ and the principles of the church, principles of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so if you're interested, you might check that out. Let me just pull up the reference images I have. For this one, I did use myself as a reference, but I might need to change a little bit more because, you know, sometimes that can like I feel like maybe the musculature is distracting a little bit, so I might thin things out. But I think this is even a little bit thicker than me, so I don't know why I made it so thick. Though I didn't want, I didn't want a weak or effeminate Christ. I think strong male. It's more what I was going for. Somebody's asking what clay is it? Can you give a close up? I can zoom in a little bit more as I'm working on this. This is. Let me zoom. This is a non-dry modeling clay that I got from the dollar store, the Dollar Tree in the US. And it comes in a bunch of colors. And I took out black and purple. Those are the darkest colors. And then I mixed everything else together. And I think it ends up being like, it's like, well, now they raised prices. So it used to be $1. $1. Now it's $1.75, so it's gone up quite a bit. I mean, inflation just does that. So it's actually not the cheapest, but I like it a little bit more than the Nara brand that Hobby Lobby has. It can also be pretty inexpensive, and it also comes in a bunch of different colors and can be melted down to one color. That camera angle's looking good. Yeah, this is a clay I've liked. It's works well. It's got a nice feel to it, nice silky clay. I've used some clays that are more expensive that I don't like as much. This one, I mean, it's soft, so it's good for larger pieces. This is the same clay I'm using for the, it's actually, I was looking at it, it's maybe even closer to it's 1.5 or 2x life size. It's a large sculpture. It keeps getting larger, I guess, as I work on it. But this is the same clay I'm using for that, and it's soft, especially when you heat it up a little bit. It becomes very soft. It's got like a silky texture that I really like. So I actually find it to be nice to sculpt with, despite it being one of the cheapest clays I've found that's an oil and wax based clay. Yeah, the whole thing will need more details. I'm just in the middle of the process. So I'm just asking what tool this is. This is called a dab tool, I believe. Dab? Or is it dab? Dab? I think it's a dab. Or dab tool. One of those. And this one came in a set of like 12 tools. But I really like the shape of it. Just kind of a flat, almost spatula shape. And works really well. Similar to the shape of the tip of your finger. That kind of rounded shape. I really like this one for texturing and detail work. But another reason I wanted to do this is because I found myself just getting very upset, just very just I guess angry at the when I was working on the sculpture of Charlie Kirk, just how many people were celebrating his death. It's just a very ugly thing. found myself struggling to, love those that hate. And so I thought I'd take a break for that reason as well. Focus on Christ is always a good break from things of the world. When did I start making this? I think it was it was either 6 months ago or a year ago, because it was during a session of General Conference for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we have one every 6 months. And so it was either 6 months ago or a year ago. I can't remember. But I haven't worked on it a lot. I started it, and then I just got, there's plenty of other projects to keep me busy. I think it was more like a year ago, because it feels like a while since I've worked on this. Maybe even a year and a half. I don't remember. But it was the session of, I do remember it was the session of General Conference where they announced that there would be a temple in Iowa, which is where I live currently, and currently there's no temple for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints here in Iowa. So I remember that it was like during that conference announcement. Well, if I remember correctly. I find that my memory is not all that good, not all that great. I shouldn't say that. I find memory to be something that I need to work at. That's a better way of saying it. Charlie Kirk's sculpture was very good and detailed. Yeah, it's still good, and I'll come back to it, but somebody suggested that I take a break and come back to it. Somebody that was that sounded sincere, and I think it was a good suggestion, and so I think that is good sometimes to just kind of have some time away, kind of forget what it looked like, because you kind of get used to how the sculpture looks when you're sculpting a specific person. You look at the sculpture so much that you get used to how the sculpture looks, and then you just make it look more and more like the sculpture instead of more and more like the person you're supposed to be sculpting. So having a break and working on other things can often give you new eyes, new sight that helps you correct things that are off. Very nice to see you sculpting something from your theology. I'm not religious, but have had a soft spot for art and sculpture that comes from a place depicting figures from varied faiths. Yeah, I think that's the most, what would you say? The most sincere form of art is when somebody says, like, this is the most important thing to me, and so I'm going to represent it artistically, which I think is one of the reasons that it's I think it's unfortunate, like many religious traditions frown on sculpture, especially like I know, from what I understand, Islam, you're not supposed to represent, like sculpt anything that looks like the human form or representational art. And that comes, I believe, from the commandment about not making graven images. So not making graven images, but that commandment, I think, was in the context of that we don't worship the thing. So the making a graven image or creating an idol of something is taking the subject or taking the representation of the subject and mistaking it for the subject. So, like, if I was to take this sculpture and then pray to the sculpture, that would be a graven image. That's something that, the sculpture has no power. It's a physical thing. I don't worship, or we try not to worship created things. Try to worship the creator of things. And so I think many traditions just say, well, we won't sculpt any likeness at all whatsoever, but I think they're missing the context, because in that same area of Scripture, there's also the commandment to build the Ark of the Covenant, which is a sculpture. It's sculpted angels that are bowing towards one another, and it describes it in detail that it's a sculpture, that there are sculptural elements to it, but that ark is a symbol for something that we're pointing ourselves towards, but it's not the thing that we worship. That it's just something to point us towards the transcendent, point us towards God, and so I do think that there is a place in Christianity for art, and I think Christians have recognized this for a while, but there's some religions where they discourage religious art, which I think is unfortunate, because I think that there's something good about it. Beard is looking nice. Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. I just trimmed it today, so I think it looks better after I trim it a little bit, because it can get a little bit unruly. Or I don't know if you're talking about the beard that I'm sculpting or my own beard. But yeah, either way, thanks. Yeah, my wife says I look better, prefers the beard, and so that's one of the reasons I've let it grow a little bit longer. I used to have just kind of scruff is what I would have, but I do feel like the beard is more distinguished. Makes me look, I think, a little bit older and more knowledgeable, maybe, regardless of whether that's true or not. I was asking how to make the hands. I might get to the hands today. There's something that is always tricky. The hands are always tricky. I don't know if I want to move to the hands just yet. But I'll get to them eventually. It's really, well, sculpting anything is really about simplifying and looking for basic, simple forms, and then trying to represent those accurately without losing things like the gesture of those forms, the gesture movement, and with the hands, I like to think about them as gloves. Like, imagine if you're wearing gloves or oven mitts or something, that where it combines all the fingers together into one shape. Sometimes when you think about it that way, it makes it a little bit easier. When did you start to get views on your sculptures? Because I know making videos that get attention is very hard. Well, I'd say I probably still don't have very many views. I mean, these live streams, what do I have? It says 6 current viewers, so it's not like there's like a huge amount of attention on my artwork. So I'd say I probably still haven't gotten a lot of attention on my stuff. That's probably, there's probably many reasons for that. I probably should be more entertaining, or there's also other, maybe my mention of politics or religion has probably also hurt my channel as an artist, but it's something that I find interesting, and I don't want to create an audience that would reject me if they knew my opinions. And so what I do is I share my opinions every once in a while to remove those that are intolerant of, Christian conservative viewpoints, but that's probably hurt my my success or where I would have been. I'd say, like, I mean, you can do things that are popular, those sometimes that works. But chasing trends, it's also, I think it hurts your authenticity when you're just trying to do something just to get followers or likes or something. But I think people notice when you're passionate about something. I think that's good. But it's just so competitive now with YouTube. I mean, I've been doing this for 10 years, YouTube, for about 10 years, and it's, I'd still say that my channel hasn't really taken off the way that I would like. But, that's just life, Sometimes things take longer than you expect. And if my channel at some point did take off, or if I, became well known for something, then it would be like, oh, there's this overnight success, but it was really an overnight success that's like 10 years in the making, which is how most quote unquote overnight successes work. It's like they're just somebody that's been working at something forever, and then all of a sudden they become popular for something. Do you spend a lot of time on reference photos? Yeah, well, a decent amount of time. I can show you guys. These are the references. I could even put some of these up on the screen, but I don't think that's necessary. But these are like the references that I took of this sculpture. And I guess these ones are more so having good references is really important. It's very difficult to work figurative without a lot of references. So I would recommend having, a collection of references that you can work from. If you're doing anything figurative, some people can get to a point where they can imagine things and they sculpt from imagination and they're very talented, but people that do that usually have a lot of time working with references first before they get to the point where they can invent. So working from references, if you can, working from life, if there's any in-person modeling sessions or something, those are always really, it's really good just to be able to observe from life, or just looking at people, or looking at your own hand. If you're sculpting a hand, making the pose yourself and sculpting that using your own hands. Those types of things are really helpful. Somebody says, I'm Buddhist. I watch you. Just be you. Everyone just needs to be respectful to other people. Yeah, well, I think that's a good way to look about it. In fact, in our church, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, there's 13 what we call articles of faith, or articles. It's like, I think it was when Joseph Smith was asked, what do you believe? What are your beliefs? And then he gave like this answer, and they became these articles of faith. But one of them is that we believe in worshiping Almighty God according to the dictates of our own conscience, and allow all men the same privilege. Let them worship how, where, or what they may. So that's something that's a little bit, I wouldn't say it's unique. I think most Christians kind of have that view of allowing people to choose, that religion shouldn't be forced on them. That's one of the differences between, Christianity and some other beliefs, particularly like Islam. I think it's explicitly that you should either convince people or fight them, like the jihad, the righteous war, that you need to either convert them or fight against them until everybody is converted. That's kind of from what I understand it, that's their religious doctrine. But we believe that people should freely choose what they believe, that nobody should be coerced by force into a belief, in our religion or in any religion. And so we believe that that should be freely and willingly chosen, which I think is a good doctrine. Because if you don't have freedom, then you can't have love. You can't really love something unless that love is freely chosen. And so you can't love God unless you choose to willingly. If somebody points a gun at you or threatens you with a sword to join a religion or else, you might join, but your heart won't be in it. It can't be in it because it was done by force. It was done by coercion in a way that it's not good. Yeah, but Buddhism has a lot of sculptures from what I see, the sculpture and art is a big part of that. Now we would, yeah. So he's asking, is your channel monetized? Yeah, it's monetized. I think I make like it's like $150 to $200 a month on my channel, something like that, in that ballpark. So it's monetized, but it's not crazy money. And I think most months, like I got monetized because one month one of my shorts went crazy and got like couple million views, and so the watch time went way up. But I think to get monetized, you have to typically be averaging about 4,000 watch hours a month. I don't know if they still do that, but that was when I was monetized, that was the system. I don't know if that's still the way that you have to be monetized, but I find myself struggling to get that many watch hours now, which is why the payout is like usually $200 or less. So it's not a crazy amount of money from this. And then they do the Proco 3D does some of the videos that I've edited. They pay me out from those two, and I think that's like another $50 a month or something. So that one's not crazy. So the most of the money comes from selling the online courses. That's typically, if you're on YouTube, typically through selling something, either your own product or somebody else's product. That's usually how most people are making money. It's not through the views themselves. It's through monetizing something else, another part, like a physical product or something or a digital product, a digital course in my case. But there's also, the merchandise and all those other things that people could monetize. Somebody's saying, how do you think this sculpture came out, good or bad? Because I think all my sculptures were mid or not good. Or how do I think this sculpture is going currently? Well, it's not finished, so I still have, but I like how it was coming, so we'll see. We'll see if I continue to like it. That can always change. It just takes one bad sculpting session, and then you can move backwards instead of forwards. I'm seeing that the arm here is looking a little bit too thick here up at the top. But you have to do a lot of bad sculptures before you get good. That's the thing. Like with any skill, really, any talent, if you're going to be good, like in the top, whatever, 10% or 5% of the people that do that thing, you just got to do it a lot. You got to do a lot of bad versions of it. And if you do enough bad sculptures, then pretty soon you'll start to do good ones. I think it's more like repetition. Like if I could say, like, make a sculpture perfect or make 10 imperfect sculptures really quickly, I'd go for 10 imperfect sculptures. Like if you're going to spend 100 hours sculpting, I think doing 10 sculptures, 10-hour sculptures, like as fast as you can, kind of pushing it, I think you'll progress faster than if you spend the 100 hours doing one sculpture, taking a really long time. But then after you do that, after you do the 10-hour sculptures, maybe taking one, your favorite one, and then working on it for another 100 hours, then you can really have it be really good. But there is something about just time, that time investment sculpting and finding ways to do it. I think setting up a live stream schedule is good. It's something that I have had a hard time keeping consistent with. As I've done YouTube, I've done live streams here and there, but I've never been very consistent about a schedule or a time or anything. And so if you can be consistent, that's probably the best way to go about it. I know you mentioned David and Goliath in a previous stream. Being raised Catholic, I was surrounded with art of the crucifixion. While very powerful, I think there's a lot of more interesting tales to pull off. Yeah, I think, one of the differences between members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and other Christian denominations is that we actually tend to focus more, like I'm doing here, on the resurrected Christ, on the risen Christ. Like when he's coming out of the tomb, that's become the symbol for our church is him resurrected, walking out of the tomb, just because we do feel that it's that the part to focus on, the part that makes it a miracle and the miraculous part of it is his resurrection and not necessarily his death, though the death and crucifixion was an important part. That was one step, but we do prefer to focus on the resurrected Christ, as opposed to like the cross for a symbol, which is just something a little bit different than between our church and the average like Christian, where usually the cross becomes the symbol. But you'll see that a little bit less in our church, just because we do try to focus on that. But I agree that there's many great stories in the Bible. I did Samson, a sculpture of Samson. One of the sculptures back there, I wanted to turn into David and do my own version of David versus Goliath, just because that's a common theme for many sculptors, many great sculptors throughout history. And so I'd like to do my own large version of David at some point. But yeah, there's many great stories in the Bible, many interesting stories. I'm in Job right now, and one of the things that struck me about Job, we've heard the story about Job, how he's like basically everything is taken from him. He's just like, God says, look at this righteous man. It's like a conversation between God and Satan, and he's like, look at this righteous man, and Satan's like, well, he's only righteous because he has all these good things. He's got a good family and wealth and all this stuff. So just, if you let me take those things away, he'll curse you. Like, just watch what happens. And God says, okay, well, you can have power to take those things away, but you can't take his life. And then like all these bad things happen. It's like one day where his sons are all killed, and his lands are taken, and he's, you know, eventually he becomes ill and sick, and his wife and his friends are all like, why don't you just curse God? And what struck me about it is I didn't realize how long it went on, of just kind of these conversations between him and his friends, and how long that suffering went on. Because I'm just like, where's the part? Because I know that there's a part at the end where things kind of work out and things get better. But one of the things that struck me about this, and I guess is a correlation to life, is sometimes those dark times, they go on a lot longer than we would prefer. So I'm like, why is it keeping, like, it just keeps going and going, that they're just having these conversations about how his friends are like, well, you probably deserve it. You probably did something wicked because, look at all these terrible things that are happening to you. But yeah, that's an interesting story. It would be an interesting sculpture to do one of Job, or yeah, I like Samson because he's kind of that mythological fighter warrior type, not necessarily a godly man. Like, he's like an angel of the Lord comes to him while he's with a prostitute, and he eventually falls victim to his own lusts because he goes after Delilah, who's sent to kind of figure out what his secret is to his strength, and then to defeat him, and he lets that lust overcome him eventually. And so it's kind of a cautionary tale, but he was, an instrument, even though he wasn't a particularly righteous man, which is interesting. A lot of the characters from the Bible are very interesting in that way, that they're actually not always that good of people. Sometimes they're kind of weird, or they do kind of strange and things you'd think, oh, I wouldn't expect a prophet or somebody that was called of God to do something like that. But you see that a lot in the Bible, that God uses imperfect people all the time. What were we talking about? Oh yeah, different stories of the Bible. Yeah. You could set up a group on Instant Messenger app, do video announcements, sell some pieces. Some might bring work your way. YouTube is very different from difficult to master these days. Oh yeah, those are all good suggestions to grow on YouTube. Yeah, that would be a good idea. Messenger, Instant Messenger, to let people know that when the live stream is going. It's not a bad idea. Maybe you could mention something like that on Instagram or something. Guess you could do that, through a Facebook group or something? Through the Messenger app, create a Facebook group where you can send out messages with every live stream, and then you could at least give people the opportunity to join if they wanted. It's a good idea. So he says, true, Jesus is not on the cross anymore. He is risen. Yeah, that's what I believe. Do you divide parts? Do you divide parts on the sculpture while going on details, like you're doing half the body of Jesus? Does it give accuracy in the sculptures? Well, usually you'll kind of do a rough version of the whole sculpture, like you just kind of fill the armature with clay, and then you kind of want to develop everything together, because if you work on one area in isolation, you can get tunnel vision and you stop seeing how that area fits into the whole, and you can make mistakes and not realize that they're mistakes. And so usually you try to build up the whole sculpture, everything together at once, and not like just do like the hands and then like the other hand or something. You kind of want to work and build everything up together. So that's how I generally recommend working is try, if you can, to be patient and work slowly, build up everything. How to find time for things while doing sculpture consistently, as you have a daughter who is young and she needs time. So you are the best man I can ask for this. Yeah, well, I have five children. One of them still growing inside my wife. So we're expecting our fifth will be born in the coming months. So I have five children. But yes, I have two daughters and two sons. And well, this is my work, and so I spent a lot of time when my daughter was just born and little, and while I was finishing up school, I spent a lot of time developing the figure sculpting fundamentals course with Proco, and um, it was really a lot of work up front building those courses. Now I'm working on a stone sculpting course that'll come out in the coming months. But those are a lot of work up front, but then they're somewhat passive. They're not totally passive because you still got to create content, and if you don't create content, then people kind of forget about it. And Proco has loads of courses that they're always adding, and so sculpture is kind of a niche, like one among many growing courses. But with those three courses that I have, generally, some money comes in for that. But because of that, because I did something that I could sell and do online, I am able to work from home. So I'm able to eat, like all our meals are together as a family, almost always, unless I have sometimes I'll have a business trip or travel for sculpture or competitions or something, not be able to take the family. But generally, it's the whole family that we go, and or the whole family's together for meals, and try not to do too much work in the evening. There's also projects we can work on together, fixing up the house, and I'm trying to be better at helping the kids to participate in that, because our kids are also homeschooled. So that's another way that we get to spend more time with kids than the average group of parents. And as far as making time for sculpture, just being disciplined. If you're going to be an artist, you have to be really disciplined with your time. If you can't force yourself to work on things and to create things, then probably you should find just a job, and you should have art just be a hobby, and just there's nothing wrong with that. Art is a great hobby, and I think most people, that's all it'll ever be, is a hobby, and that's perfectly fine. And that's actually, I think, a good thing, because it allows you to build other skills in the workforce that might be beneficial, that might help you in art. Like if you learn construction skills or building or welding, or like those type of things can help you in art. So depending on what you're doing or even marketing or whatever, if you're doing anything that somebody's paying you to do, then maybe that'll help you be a better artist. So, but you got to be self-motivating, because if you can't get yourself to create artistically, even when you're not feeling like it, then you're going to have a hard time being successful or finding success as an artist. But it's difficult, making money as an art is difficult. That's, there's a stereotype for a reason of the starving artist, just because it's difficult to monetize creative things. Whether that's art or music or whatever, there's far more people that are interested in it and that try to do it than people that become successful at it and make a lot of money. So just realize that that's like the risk of being an artist, is that it's just difficult to monetize. And if you have that expectation that it'll just be difficult, but you're willing to do it anyway, then I think that's the right attitude to have when approaching art or other things. Just, it's going to be difficult, but I'm going to enjoy it, and I love it too much not to do anything else. That's kind of the boat that I was in. But yeah. Um, what type of armature is best? Well, I have several videos on armatures. The video on the Proco 3D YouTube channel is one that I say is my favorite, but um, it's a little bit more complicated. The one that I have on this channel, I have a couple videos on this channel on making armatures, and they're more simple armatures, which are easier to make and a little bit quicker to build. So I'd say that those are probably better for most people. But if you're doing, it depends on the type of clay you're using, because if you're planning on making a mold and casting it, then the armature can stay inside of the clay. But if you're gonna be taking the armature out and then firing it like in a kiln, then you want to use a different type of armature, something that's easier to remove. In fact, with water-based clays, Leroy Transfield, who's a sculptor that I greatly admire, he just uses a single metal rod like stuck into a piece of wood. He'll just stick the metal rod and hammer it in place, and then that's his armature, and then he uses that to support the clay for the figure and builds everything up nice and thick. And then as the clay gets a little bit stiffer, like he'll build up walls of clay to support areas, and as the clay gets stiffer, then he can remove those walls of clay, and the whole thing is solid, and then he just pulls out the pin or the rod, just the smooth metal rod. He pulls that out once the sculpture has set up till it's like a cheese hard, and then he can patch those holes and fire the whole thing as a solid piece and slow fire it. And his pieces are really nice, and it's a really nice technique for that. So it depends on, maybe that is what you're looking for. If you have access to a kiln and natural clay, which is cheap and easy to find, and you can generally you can even find it yourself if you know where to look for it. If you have access to that, then there's the kiln is the tricky thing, but I don't have a kiln, so I haven't done a lot of that. Most of the stuff I've done is for mold making, so I don't have to worry about removing the armature too much. And a lot of the stuff I just keep, so I'll leave the clay sculpted, and you can see, I don't know if you can see in the background, but there's a bunch of sculptures in the background that I've sculpted, and then I just keep them because I like keeping the original clay. And if I decide to mold them and cast them at some point, then I can do that. Are your kids interested in sculptures? I don't know. It's kind of too early to tell. Kind of tricky to tell. They like drawing, and I encourage them to drawing. I try to provide them with sketchbooks whenever they run out of space on their sketchbook. I try to give them some more space to use. So, my youngest son, well, the youngest other than the baby that my wife's pregnant with, but my youngest son is he really likes sculpture. So there's a sculpture I did of me holding him, and so he really likes having that sculpture, and he does really like sculpture. But he's not yet 2, so so I don't know if that stays the same. But I probably would encourage my kids to do something more practical if they could. I think most dads are that way, where they're like, do something more practical. Even me being an artist, I'm like, do something more practical, because it was really hard making money as an artist. So I don't know if I would encourage them to go that route, unless they're like super passionate about it, and then I'd help them as much as I could. But it is a tricky thing. But maybe that's not what people want to hear, but I'm just, I used to be more, I don't know, I used to be more like, oh, the reason that artists struggle is just because of their attitude, but I don't know. I guess I've become more pessimistic as I've gone on, just because I'm like, oh yeah, it really is kind of hard to make a living as an artist. This is tricky. It's hard to monetize. But maybe I'm just not good at it. Maybe I'm not just not good at that part of it. But other people could certainly be better at many parts of the artistic endeavor than I am. What course would you recommend to people of yours? Well, generally I recommend the Figure Sculpting Fundamentals course to start off with. That's like the basic course on sculpting people. Kind of gets people started. And so that's what I generally recommend people start with, and then moving on to like the portrait sculpting course, which goes more in depth, or the hand sculpting course. Those are the three that I have built so far. Working on the stone sculpting course. Stone sculpting is really fun, and I think abstract stone sculpting is a little bit easier to monetize. If you're somebody that likes art, but you have a hard time creating something that's good enough where you feel like you're able to sell it for money. Sometimes abstract stone sculptures I find them easier to sell, and I've sold most of the stone sculptures that I've ever made. I've sold. So, but I also do like a show once a year, and I sell them online. So sometimes the abstract stuff is a little bit easier, and stone is such a nice medium that if you're able to find good blocks of stone, it can be really fun to work with. So that might be an interesting course for people if they're looking for something that's a little bit easier, in my opinion, to monetize. But that one won't be coming out for another couple months. Hopefully sometime in November will be the pre-sale, and then we'll start releasing content for that course after that. But you'll see that on the Proco 3D YouTube channel. I'll put up all the information for that once that starts going. We'll start releasing videos on that channel. And I'll have plenty of videos on this channel letting people know once that's available. But yeah, the Figure Sculpting Fundamentals is a great place to start, where I recommend most people start. It's just a good basics, kind of the fundamental principles of sculpting that I think you should know if you're interested in trying to be a figurative sculptor, sculpt people. But even my abstract stuff in stone is based on the figure, and figurative stuff helps it. But it just, I just take the figure and I kind of choose a gesture and then abstract that. There'll probably be some lessons on abstracting and all of that. Or there almost certainly will be those lessons. Thanks for the questions. I appreciate the questions. It's a lot easier to have a conversation going with the audience when there's good questions, and so I appreciate all the great questions that people have been asking and talking about. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I still feel like this arm is too thick, so I'm just going to come in and thin it out a little bit more, particularly the upper arm. Have you ever made a public art piece? If not, maybe donate a piece, whether it be of a school or library. It'll be the best free advertising you'll ever get. Yeah, I've the only like public, quote unquote, public pieces. I guess technically they're not public. So I've never done any public pieces, but I've done private pieces that people put out like in their front yard or something that are large. large stone sculptures. So yeah, I definitely should work on getting some public pieces that I can donate. Maybe large stone, either donate or even put up for like some towns have it where you can, well, they'll pay you to put it there for a year, and then it's for sale while it's there, and then you take it back, and it's like, it's maybe they pay you $1,000 to store it there for a year. But there's programs like that, so I think I should also look into that probably. As well. Hey, Mr. Andrew, that looks amazing. Hope you're doing great. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I am doing well. Better than I deserve, as Dave Ramsey would say. And this tool I'm using is actually just a butter knife that I bent. I bent with, what did I use? A vise or something? I just bent that into a loop. Ideally, it would be better if this was attached to something over here, because when you put a lot of pressure, it just wants to bend over. But if you had two parts coming together, then when you put pressure, it puts pressure on either side and it doesn't twist while you're working. So that's a modification that I like to make. But here, if I just put my finger there, that allows me to put pressure on both areas. So that's a tool that costs about 10 cents at or I don't know how much I got this for, at a thrift store or something, a used butter knife, however much they sell those for. But I've used this tool a lot for the Charlie Kirk portrait sculpture that I've used. This one's been really, really helpful for that. Okay, I think we're coming up on an hour. I think I'll end it about there. And so this is, a work in progress, something that I'll be working on during these live streams as well. And I have a bunch of other stuff. There's no shortage of things that I need to be working on. Maybe I'll even do some live streams with some of the stone sculptures that I'm working on for the stone sculpting course. I just got some tools, the most I've ever spent on tools for sculpting, and so maybe I'll do a video about that at some point. But if you're interested, the Figure Sculpting Fundamentals course is a great place to start to learn how to represent people, learn about building armatures and building out the forms, and step-by-step lessons and demos and 3D models and all of that good stuff. And so if you're interested, then I definitely recommend checking that out, and it really helps me out, people that purchase that and join the course, the online course. You can just follow it at your own speed, and you can upload images of your work to get critiqued by myself and others over at proco.com. And yeah, that's where I'd recommend people go first, and then there's also a portrait sculpting course, and that one's more a dive into anatomy, and there's a hand sculpting course as well, and we'll get into the hands for this sculpture a little bit later. I don't feel quite ready. I want the arms to be pretty much solidified before I get to the hands. And yeah, there's still quite a bit to do on this, so here's a turnaround look at what it's looking like right now. At least the upper part, you can't really see the whole thing. But yeah, with that, stay creative, stay productive, and I'll see you around.